Should I? Yeah, so like I said, my name is SpiritLinda, and I come from a place of service, and I've served with sexual assault, domestic violence, and the spiritual community. And I love the spiritual community. I love being a self-love teacher. And that is my calling. And I know that is my calling because I enjoy helping people remember what self-love is. That self-love is not being narcissistic. Self-love is not just what you call pampering. And self-love is not just self-care. There's other areas that it's more important than those areas that people think of. So I'm here today to share with you what self-love is. But most importantly, I wanted to talk about, because this is October, Domestic Violence Month. And
Yes.
so I was going to focus on self-love, but I'll just give you a brief definition of self-love. And then I just wanted to hit on some points of domestic violence, because domestic violence, if you're engaged in domestic violence and the victim of domestic violence, then there's obviously some self-love missing in your life.
Yes.
So one of the things that can help you get out of that situation is focusing more on yourself than on the perpetrator that's perpetrating this violence against you, and knowing that it's not your fault. And your job is to really focus on you and helping yourself. So self-love, I'll give you the definition that my teacher, my mentor, Christina Rilo, who taught me. The self-love is simply love directed towards the self. It's the same kind of love you give to another person. Um, the love of compassion, care, courage, acceptance, acknowledgement, celebration. All of those things that we give to others, we give it to ourselves. We
Yes.
remember to give that to ourselves. So I wanted to just take a moment of silence, just a moment, just to acknowledge this month as domestic violence, and to send some love out to the survivors and victims of domestic violence all over the world and all over the nation. So I just want to take a moment to do that. Okay, thank you for that. So I was involved with this month, I was involved with with a federation for police that are organizing a training program that's going to be with um, with the police department in the city of Chicago. And so they asked for advocates to come and be a part of the curriculum to train the trainers. And I was fortunate to come and be a part of that. And I gave some feedback on what I thought should be in the training on the part of advocates reaching out to assist the police, and the police sensitivity that they need to participate in the training. So one of the things that I thought was important was the no one is talking about, especially the police department, generational trauma.
Yes.
Generational trauma is trauma that people of color, um, marginalized people have been afflicted with from the time they came over to this country.
Yes.
And where my mother, I consider, and my grandmother was more resilient than I am. And then, so I am more resilient to that trauma than my children. And then my children, which is my grandchildren, are not as resilient as my children. So therefore, you have a lot of violence in our communities because they don't have the resources to deal with generational trauma. So I asked them to make sure to at least take a look at that portion to include generational trauma when they're coming into our communities, and not just pulling their guns out and killing people of color, but also to understand the pain and the suffering that's going on in our community that's causing them to perpetrate violence on one another. So that was a very big thing for this month.
So what gave you the passion behind this purpose? What was the catalyst for you that started you on this road to help people with the generational trauma and the self-love and even the domestic violence?
Mm. Well, I grew up in my father was an alcoholic.
Okay.
And so I grew up in a traumatic household. My mother, like I said, was very resilient, and she made us feel like it was normal. So we felt normal. And it wasn't until I got older that I realized that I had some trauma, internal trauma to deal with, because it was normal for me, you know, to be able to just look at it and walk away from it and go to bed, go to sleep, and go to school and go to work and move on. That was one part of my childhood. Then I was raped by an acquaintance, a family member that, well, not a family member, my brother's friend. And we grew up together as a child. So I called it a family member at that time, you know, that's what we did. And so I was raped. So that was part of the domestic violence and the sexual assault. So I ended up being called to work, spiritually called to work as a criminal justice legal advocate for sexual assault. So I was helping victims and survivors of sexual assault, going to the police station and going to court for them and going to the hospital to collect evidence and things like that. So I became very passionate for the suffering that was going on
Yes.
with these women, men and children. So
Do you find it a lot with men?
men, men, it's domestic violence is a lot. It's going on with men, but it's taboo. It's taboo because they don't report it. Women are more amped to report it than men. So it's taboo,
Mm-hmm.
you know, in that way. Yeah. So
Are you finding out that men will actually come forward and talk about it with you?
men are now, this generation, this new generation, they're more willing to talk about it now. There has been even shows on television where men, even in the hip hop community, where men have been talking about trauma, um, domestic violence. So they're talking about it. The conversation is out there, you know, but
Okay.
it's not as out there as it needs to be. But it is definitely out there. Yes.
Okay.
Mhm.
So if you had a person to come to you and they were dealing with domestic violence, what would be the first steps that you would do with them?
You know, oftentimes we're not even aware that we're in a situation of domestic violence. Because if we don't know what domestic violence is, how are we going to be able to deal with it when we're just thinking that our loved ones is just fighting us? It's just a fight, you know, and then it becomes another fight. And all of a sudden we just had a fight. But it's a psychological aspect to all of that fighting. And there's four types of domestic violence. There's physical violence, sexual violence, stalking, which is newly added to the domestic violence, stalking. And then there's psychological aggression, which most of us are familiar with that form. But the physical abuse is when a person hurts or tries to hurt a partner by hitting, kicking, or using some other type of physical force. That's easy to be recognized.
Yeah.
We recognize when someone is beating on our body. That's easy.
Yes.
The emotional part, the psychological part, is the use of verbal and nonverbal communication, with the intent to harm another person mentally or emotionally. That's the part that doesn't get recognized because you're being groomed to accept that type of behavior from your loved ones. And then there's the Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde aspect of domestic violence, whereas the person who's perpetrating the violence will be very aggressive and doing what they do. And then all of a sudden, an hour or a day later, they're bringing you flowers. They're bringing you flowers saying that I love you and I'm sorry. So then you accept that cycle and it's going on and on and on and on. So that psychological is the worst. It is the far worst.
Because you can't see it.
You can't see it. You can't. You cannot see it.
And people are taught to sweep it. So, they sweep everything, oh, I'm fine, oh no, he just does that. He don't mean it. And he do mean it. He did it, he meant it. Yeah. So yeah, I agree with that. It's like you can't see it, nobody can tell, not like if they're beating you for breakfast, lunch, and dinner. Exactly. You have some bruises somewhere.
Yeah. Yeah.
But the psychological just leaves the bruises on the inside.
Absolutely. You don't see it.
And then just like you said, if they normalize it, if that's what and so many of us have been through that, because just like you said, if you qualify domestic violence as psychological as well as physical and sexual stalking, all those things, then probably 99% of people have actually been through that, because generally if it's not physical, then it's psychological most of the time.
Yeah, absolutely.
And just like you said, it's generational. So it's been passed down, and this is what we did. It's kind of like, when we beat our kids. Well, we beat our kids because we were beat.
Exactly. Yeah.
That's how they taught us how to control them.
Capital punishment.
Yes. And so I believe that the same thing with domestic violence. It's like, once it's normalized inside of us, then we have to do some work in order to get it where it's not normal, because it's not normal. Absolutely. But it's just how we think, right? So when you are working with your people, say like, I want to give you an example. Like if you ran across a woman and you knew that she was dealing with psychological domestic violence, because that when people deal with psychological violence, a lot of times they hide it and they try real hard. They try real hard, and that's usually how you can tell. At least that's how I can tell. So when you talk to somebody like that and they're in this place and you know that they clearly need help, but they don't seem quite ready to get it, what would you say to them?
Well, the first thing to say to someone who is experiencing any type of suffering is to let them know that it's not their fault. You put that, because that opens the heart. That opens the heart space. So you let them know that it's not your fault. And you let them know that they're not alone. That there are resources out here. The domestic violence hotline, and I could mention that hotline number. It's 877-863-6338. The domestic violence hotline number would put them in touch with counselors that can help them develop a plan to get out of the situation, because as we know, as advocates know, and the police department know, the most dangerous time when most women get killed is when they decide to leave the perpetrator.
Yes.
So there has to be a very conscious way of dealing with that. So you just can't don't say, girl, you should leave him, and you should leave her, or you should leave them, whatever the situation may be. That's may sound good and all, but it can lead them to be in a very, very dangerous situation, because
Yes.
most of the people get really attacked and brutalized, and it increased, the escalation increase as they try to get out of that situation. It increases. So the best thing that you can do is you tell them that it's not their fault. You tell them about the resources with the domestic violence hotline, and then hopefully they can get an order of protection put against the individual. You can talk to them about, you can have an order of protection put against the individual. But mind you, some people don't have the financial resources to just leave and get out of the situation.
Okay, that was my next thing.
Yeah.
Well, because the thing is, you're right, because that is so real. Because
Yeah.
I met so many people that they were in those situations, and in order for them to get out, they had to actually like go to a shelter, find a
Absolutely.
shelter.
There's shelters. There
And
are shelters.
yeah, and it's like, or I know one girl, she slept in her car for like a week or two.
Yeah.
Because she was like, had to get away from him, and
Mhm.
and she said she would just go different places where he didn't know, so that she
Mhm.
could get away from him. And I'm like, that is horrible. Because suppose if he'd have found her, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Just
Yeah.
like you said, it ends up a lot of times in the ultimate violence.
Mhm.
You know,
Yeah.
so you're right about that. And if they don't, it's almost like, and I think about it like this, and I don't want to be trite about it, but I think about it as far as like people that are in the middle of a hurricane. When hurricane season comes.
Mhm.
Okay, like
Mhm.
Katrina, when Katrina hit, and people
Mhm.
say, well, why didn't those people just leave?
Right.
Well, everybody ain't set to leave.
Right. That's right.
Everybody don't have money that they can just leave,
Yeah.
you
Yeah.
know?
It is. It's a psychological whirlwind. And I guess you can, in the mind, in the mindset, there's a framework that is chaotic, and there's a lot of fear, there's a lot of shame, there's a lot of blame. So there is a hurricane of emotions that's going on, that's involved when it comes to domestic violence.
Yes.
And so, particularly about when it comes to someone that you love is doing this to you,
Yes.
it's not a stranger.
Yes.
So that makes it even more devastating and creates suffering that leads to trauma
Yes.
that remains in the body.
Yes.
There's a Buddhist saying um, that we are disconnected from like there's a head, and then there's no space here, and then the body is floating by itself.
Oh, wow.
So there's a disconnection there when you're feeling all of those waves of emotions, and mental, your mind telling you to run, no, stay. Oh, this gonna happen to you, or this gonna happen to you. And your body, which carries your emotions, um, is saying, this hurts, because love should not hurt. Love shouldn't hurt. It just simply shouldn't hurt. But your body is telling you this hurts. This hurts. But your brain and your mind being so disconnected from the body in these type of situations. I remember when I was sexually, when I was raped, I disconnected, my body disconnected from, for survival, for that survival. I actually saw myself dislocate and leave the body and was looking and
Watching.
watching, and I actually did that. And I thought I was losing my mind. I actually thought was gone. I actually thought I was like dead.
Dead. It's a coping mechanism is what it
Yeah,
is.
yeah.
It
And
keeps you safe.
then imagine you going through this trauma.
Being present.
Yeah. And more often, it's not like we were back in the age days where we had to go and lions and tigers and bears to be afraid of that. But this is the lions and tigers and bears are stimulating you to go into that flight mode, is your loved one. And this is happening to you on a regular basis.
And the thing is so many people deal with this stuff and they get out, but then they don't get the help that they need in order to process the trauma. Because what happens too, a lot of times is, just like you said, this is a loved one. This is not somebody in the street beating you behind. You know what I mean? This is somebody that you took some vows with, or somebody that you've been living with, or whatever, for years. And this person has, been violating you in that way. And so when you get out of that situation, even once you get your body out of the situation, to me, that's just the first step. The next thing, you have to start working on that trauma, because it's not going to serve you well later on.
That's right. And then what about your children? Now this becomes generational, because your children have been in that situation, looking at their father or looking at their mother lover, engaged in this type of aggressive, so that it normalized that to them. So they end up in a relationship with someone who does the very same thing to them.
Yes. I have seen it so many times. It's like, so your mama, used to get her behind whipped, for breakfast, lunch, and dinner. And then you go and you get a man that does the same thing to you.
Yeah.
And because you just like you said, it's normalized for you. You think this is normal. This is how you're supposed to live.
Yeah.
And then when you find out that that's not normal, and that's not right, and that person can't love you if they're beating on you,
low self-esteem, you're the low self-esteem that comes with being a part of this type of dynamic, it really does affect entire communities. It does, it extends to the community, because you have this historical dynamic that's going on, even from slavery, where we were separated as field and house. And so the separation dynamic in that created trauma from slavery.
Yes.
And so we have not even been able to really deal with the separation. Anytime that there's a separation and it takes us from the wholeness, that creates trauma, because we were created to be whole, and be happy, to experience joy, to experience love.
Yes.
We are going to suffer, because that's part of the human element, but we're also have an innate ability to reach the potentialities and the possibility to heal from that suffering.
Yes.
Not to stay in that. And so there are different tools that people can use, and people have used, to heal themselves from various forms of suffering, to include domestic violence and sexual assault. Religion has been one.
I was going to say, so what are some tools that you would suggest or use for your clients?
Well, religion is a big staple in our community, but it cannot be just religion. Religion has its own form of healing and awakening, but we also have to deal with getting those resources as counseling. We need to make sure that we get counseling. Make sure that this type of I used to go to the schools and teach on domestic violence.
So we want to normalize getting counseling, because especially in our community, I felt like that was important to say, because, you know, a lot of times in our community, we don't go get that type of help.
Right.
Somebody suggested, like, oh, I'm not crazy.
We
But
want to
that's not all that's
normalize.
about.
We want to normalize reaching out for, instead of making it a stigmatized,
Yes.
we want to normalize reaching out for counseling. You know, and even in all of the reality shows, if you notice that people are going to counseling and they're encouraging counseling and all that type of stuff. In the hip hop community, they're encouraging counseling. And so there's there's much higher awareness today than there has been in the past.
Oh,
but
yeah.
My whole thing is, I want it to be eliminated. Okay. I want us to wake up one day and say, we don't need domestic violence advocacy. We don't need sexual assault advocacy, because for two reasons. People have been held accountable. Society sees that you're going to be held accountable. So there's some prevention, and people are getting the cure that they need to deal with these type of issues when they arrive. And like you say, that it's not stigmatized. There's no blame, there's no shame in all of this associated, where it's silence. It is a silent thing. So when we get to the point that it's silent no more, that's where I would love to see us in society, in our society, in our humanity, that we see that this is silent no more, that you can talk about it and you can be bold about it.
Yes. Yes.
You can build your own life by your own design, not by what society says can be or cannot be.
Yes. Yes. That is so powerful. Okay, so we're gonna have to wrap this up.
Mm-hmm.
But so I have a question. Is there something in the world that you're curious about? Does it have to do with your life or your business or anything like that? What would that be?
For me personally,
yeah,
I live in the land of curiosity. Every day I wake up and I want to be curious. Every day I wake up and I want to live in that childlike mentality that I am curious, because as long as I am curious, my heart and my mind is open to receive the guidance, the inspiration, the creativity that life has to offer. So curiosity is amazing that you picked that, because I love living in the land of curiosity. It's where I wake up, it's where I go to sleep, it's where I hang out. I'm always coming into every relationship curious.
That's deep, because I was going to share mine. Mine is like, I always think, why in the future do we have to go back to riding horses? You know, like I think about The Walking Dead and some of those other shows where, you know, we're in the future and they've got The Walking Dead, all the craziness, but why can't the cars ride? And why can't we, you know, why does it have to go all back there? You know, and that's like one of the crazy things I think about, that I was curious about, because I kept seeing all these different movies and then going in the future, but then they're going back to the past. Why?
Yeah. So what I hear you saying is that the progression, you see progression, but then you also see going backwards again. So there, where is you're like, where's the happy medium here? Because if
right, and why do we have to do that?
Yeah.
Why can't we go forward like the Jetsons?
Right.
You know, be flying in the car.
Well, there's a reason 1% of the population that controls the world is invested in us staying in the dark.
Yeah. That's a whole nother interview. All right, so what we So what we're going to do is I want you to share with the people, if you're doing a program or anything right now that you would like to share with the people, and also just share how they can connect with you. So when they get ready to reach out, they'll know how to find you.
Okay. You can connect with me on SpiritLinda at SpiritLinda Davenport on Facebook. Um, Now, what I can say, what I would love to put a calling out there, a call to action, is that you check on someone this month. Check on someone. Get involved with, call the National Domestic Violence Hotline, 1-877-863-6338. And that is the Illinois hotline, but then they'll connect you to anyone in your area.
Okay, that was my question.
Yeah, and so do that. And the hotline is confidential. It's available 24 hours a day, and it can help you no matter what your language you speak. So if you would reach out, and touch somebody, make this world a better place. That's all I can give you guys.
Yes, that was perfect. Perfect. Reach out and make this world a better place. Yes, yeah. That is awesome. So I have enjoyed this. This has been so much fun. I often wish that I could do it longer because we always get into some good stuff. But we'll have to do it again. We'll have to do something else again. And I'm looking forward to collaborating with SpiritLinda on some stuff. So thank y'all for watching, for listening to us. It's been amazing. I'm so super excited that this show is going to be on Mupo TV. It's just amazing to me. And I'm just so grateful for the opportunities. And I'm grateful for the opportunities to interview amazing, beautiful spirits like SpiritLinda. So thank y'all for joining us. We're going to go right now. And have a wonderful rest of your day, night, weekend, whenever you are catching this. Bye now.